I've always found peace in late-night walks. There's something about the stillness of the world at that hour that simplifies everything. For over 40 years, I've worked as a welder, and now I live alone on a sprawling farm with my dog, Bosley. The house is far too big for just one person, but after my wife Maria passed away, I couldn't bring myself to downsize. The kids left years ago, and ever since cancer took her, it's been just me and Bosley. Me and Tiam and Steer. One night, after a grueling day in the workshop, I decided to take my usual walk. My property is large, and a single loop around it is usually enough to clear my head. The cool air felt refreshing as Bosley trotted alongside me, his tail wagging with enthusiasm. Sometimes, I think he loves me more than I love myself. As I rounded the last corner, heading back toward the house, something unusual caught my attention. I glanced up at the second-story window, the one that looks out from the bedroom Maria and I used to share. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw movement. I froze mid-step, staring at the window. No one should have been in there. I hadn't set foot in that room for years. My stomach churned as anger surged. The idea of someone breaking into my home was intolerable. I stormed into the house and rushed upstairs, my heart pounding. No one should have been in there. I hadn't set foot in that room for years. My stomach churned as anger surged. The idea of someone breaking into my home was intolerable. I stormed into the house and rushed upstairs, my heart pounding. When I opened the door, the room was just as I had left it, empty and untouched. I searched every corner, but found nothing. Despite my rising unease, I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just a trick of the light or my tired mind. But the unease lingered. The next night, I woke to Bosley growling softly. He's a good dog, rarely making a sound unless there's something wrong. I sat up in bed, straining to listen. That's when I heard it. A faint creaking from upstairs. My mind instantly jumped to footsteps. I grabbed my flashlight, determined to find the source. With every step I took, my anxiety grew. When I reached the bedroom again, it was the same as before, undisturbed, but the uneasy feeling in my chest was undeniable now. The following evening, I came downstairs to find the kitchen lights blazing. I was certain I had turned them off before bed. Panic began to set in. Someone was in my house. I called the police, explaining the situation. They arrived and combed through the house, but they found no evidence of an intruder. They were polite but skeptical. I could tell they didn't believe me. The worst night came soon after. Unable to sleep, I ventured upstairs again, hoping to put my mind at ease. But when I opened the door, my heart dropped. Scattered across the floor were Maria's clothes, the ones I had carefully packed away after her death. And then I saw her. A woman stood in the doorway, staring at me. She wasn't Maria. She was too short. Her face was obscured, but the sheer wrongness of her presence sent a chill down my spine. Without thinking, I lunged at her. She turned and fled, darting down the stairs and out the front door. By the time I made it outside, she was gone. Bosley and I searched the property, but there was no trace of her. For months, I lived in a state of heightened anxiety. Every creak, every shadow, every faint noise sent me into a spiral of dread. I slept with my rifle by my bed, prepared for the worst. Then, one night, I saw her again. She was standing in the yard, silhouetted by the moonlight, staring directly at me through the window. My blood ran cold. I grabbed my rifle and ran outside, Bosley at my heels. She didn't move. I fired a few warning shots into the air, hoping to scare her off. She turned and vanished into the darkness. I haven't seen her since, but I know she'll return. The waiting is almost worse than the encounters themselves. I'm prepared to defend myself if it comes to that. But living in this constant state of fear is wearing me down. If anything changes, I'll send an update. Thank God for Bosley. I don't know what I'd do without him. I work for a catering service, which means I spend most of my time on the road, often late at night. My job isn't glamorous. Lugging equipment in a massive company truck and dealing with odd hours wasn't what I imagined for my career, but it pays the bills. By the time I get home, I'm either so wired from caffeine that I can't sleep, or so exhausted I crash for 12 hours straight. One night, after an especially long shift, I was finally driving my own car again and heading home around 2 a.m. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten in hours. There's a McDonald's just off the highway near my house, a beacon of comfort food at ungodly hours. Despite how late it was, there were a few cars in the drive-thru ahead of me, which seemed odd for a Tuesday night. As I waited, I noticed an old, beat-up Volkswagen parked in the corner of the lot. Its windows were tinted pitch black and it didn't seem to belong. McDonald's wasn't allowing dine-in customers at that hour, so I found it strange that anyone would be sitting in the parking lot. I brushed it off as someone grabbing a bite in their car. Still, after getting my food, I decided I wasn't ready to head home just yet. I craved some quiet time to relax and eat. A nature preserve near my house came to mind. The preserve has a scenic lookout point with a breathtaking view of the city. And it was a favorite spot for me and my high school friends. It had been years since I visited, and the nostalgia tempted me. The gravel parking lot at the preserve was empty when I arrived. I parked, ready to enjoy the peace, but as I was about to turn off my car, headlights appeared. A shiver ran down my spine as the same Volkswagen from McDonald's pulled into the lot. My unease grew. What were the odds? The car parked at a distance, and its engine went silent. I couldn't see inside due to the tinted windows, and nothing happened for a minute. I convinced myself it was just a coincidence and tried to relax. But the paranoia lingered. Not wanting to stay alone, I FaceTimed my friend Sebastian. Surprisingly, he was awake, working on a paper. I convinced him to join me, and he said he'd be there in 10 minutes. While waiting, I kept my eyes glued to the Volkswagen. It didn't move, but the tension in the air was suffocating. When Sebastian finally arrived, I felt a wave of relief. We left our cars and began walking up the trail to the lookout. Just as the parking lot faded from view, I glanced back. The Volkswagen was still there, but this time, all 4 doors opened simultaneously. 4 men stepped out, standing silently as if deciding their next move. I nudged Sebastian, who saw them too. Without a word, we quickened our pace up the trail. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. When we reached the lookout, the city lights momentarily distracted me. It was a beautiful sight, but the unease in my chest wouldn't go away. Our peace was short-lived. Laughter and muffled voices echoed behind us. We turned to see three men approaching, sharing a blunt. They seemed relaxed, even friendly, but their presence unnerved me. They walked straight toward us instead of finding their own spot, as if they were deliberately closing the distance. One of them, covered in tattoos with a nose ring, offered us a hit. We declined, but one of his friends laughed and muttered something under his breath. Trying to diffuse my nerves, I asked if they'd been at McDonald's earlier. The tattooed guy's smile vanished and his expression turned cold. I realized something chilling. There had been 4 men in the Volkswagen, but only 3 were standing in front of us. Panic set in. Sebastian noticed too, and we subtly started backing away. Suddenly, we saw the 4th man lurking in the shadows near the tree line, holding something in his hand. Before we could process what was happening, he started moving toward us. "Run!" Sebastian shouted, and we bolted down the trail. Footsteps thundered behind us, getting closer with every step. My heart pounded as adrenaline surged through my veins. When we finally reached the parking lot, we dove into our cars and sped off. I glanced in my rearview mirror to see the men scrambling back into their Volkswagen. I drove aimlessly, not daring to go home in case they followed. Sebastian and I regrouped at his place, still shaking. He revealed that he had snapped a photo of the men earlier, and we decided to report the incident to the police. The next day, we returned to the McDonald's and showed the photo to an employee. His face went pale as he explained the backstory. The tattooed man had been fired months ago after harassing his ex-girlfriend, who also worked there. Despite a restraining order, he kept returning to the parking lot, waiting for her. Hearing this sent chills down my spine. We had unknowingly crossed paths with a dangerous, unhinged individual. While the police assured us they would investigate, I haven't been back to that McDonald's or the nature preserve since. Even now, every time I see a Volkswagen, I feel a pang of fear.